Welcome back to Explaining Everything, the channel where we dive into the stories and mysteries behind everyday things. Today's question comes from one of our curious viewers, Leaf Lover 9000. Thanks for the suggestion, Leaf Lover. You asked, how did the seasons get their name? Now, you might think the answer is simple. Maybe some ancient poet was like, "Spring is nice," and everyone nodded in agreement. But no, there's way more weirdness, history, and linguistic chaos than you'd expect. So if you've ever looked outside, seen a pile of leaves, or wondered why fall sounds like a workplace accident, stick around. Today, we're digging into the origins of spring, summer, fall, and winter, right here on Explaining Everything. Let's start with spring, the season of allergies, baby animals, and people pretending they like gardening. The word spring actually came from the phrase springing time, which sounds like a bouncy castle convention, but actually referred to plants literally springing out of the ground. Back in Old English, the season was called Lenten, which eventually gave us the word Lent. Yes, the Christian fasting thing. Because nothing says plants are growing like, please give up chocolate. Anyway, by the 14th century, people started calling it spring of the leaf or springtime, and then eventually just spring. Because humans are lazy, and if we can shave syllables, we will. So to recap, plants started popping up. Someone said, "Hey, look, the plants are springing," and everyone just ran with it. Also, spring cleaning? Not a metaphor. That's just medieval people realizing their homes smelled like goat and regret after a long winter and deciding it was time to scrub the place before inviting anyone over. Now let's talk about summer. You know it, you love it, or maybe you hate it because you lack air conditioning and your thighs stick to every surface. The word summer has ancient roots, no pun intended. It comes from the Old English word sumor, which comes from Proto-Germanic sumeras, which comes from Proto-Indo-European sem. And all these words mean together, or one. How did we get from together to sweating profusely under the sun? Great question. Basically, ancient folks noticed that summer was the time when everything came together. Crops, warmth, people emerging from caves to have long debates about the stars and invent sandals. The Latin word for summer was estus, which sounds like a luxury skincare brand, but that's a whole other rabbit hole. But the fun part is, summer has had the same name for like 1,000 years. It's the Beyoncé of seasons. Classic, iconic, never changed it up, didn't have to. Fun fact, in medieval times, summer was also the time when peasants got the joy of harvesting crops under the blazing sun in itchy wool. It's basically what CrossFit is now, except no one gave you a protein shake after. Next is fall, or autumn, depending on how fancy your vocabulary is, or whether your spell check is set to British English. Now fall is the only season that sounds like it tripped, which, considering it's the season where leaves give up and dramatically fling themselves from trees, actually makes sense. The word fall comes from fall of the leaf, which is what people called it in the 16th century. Very literal, very poetic, and slightly emo. Autumn, on the other hand, comes from Latin autumnus. No one's entirely sure what autumnus originally meant, but we do know it entered English through French, which means it showed up wearing a scarf and asking if this wine is locally sourced. In fact, autumn was the original term in English before fall started gaining popularity in, you guessed it, the United States. Because Americans saw leaves dropping and said, "Look, it's the fall." And that was that. So now we have two names. In the UK, it's autumn. In the US, it's fall. And in Australia, it's just we're upside down and confused. Please send help. Finally, we get to winter, the season of hot cocoa, seasonal depression, and asking yourself if hibernation is a viable lifestyle. The word winter comes from the Old English, winter, which, looks exactly the same. It hasn't changed in over 1,000 years because winter doesn't care what you think. Winter is. It likely comes from a Proto-Indo-European root word wend, meaning wet or white. So basically a wet or white season. Honestly, accurate. Sometimes both at the same time. Slush, nature's middle finger. But winter hasn't always been welcome. Back in ye olden days, winter was terrifying. It meant cold, darkness, food shortages, and trying not to freeze your face off. So naturally people said, let's give it a depressing name and move on. Side note, ever noticed how winter sounds like someone sighing while saying winner? Probably just a coincidence, but it's oddly poetic. Okay, now here's where things get wild. Not all cultures even divide the year into 4 seasons. Some have 2, wet and dry. Others have 6. In Japan, they basically have mini-seasons every other week. It's like a seasonal tasting menu. And some indigenous cultures don't name seasons by temperature at all. They go by what's happening in nature, like time when salmon run or moon of the snow blindness. Much cooler than, oh no, it's sweater weather again. So the names of the seasons, like most words, just kind of evolved. People saw stuff happening, made up names based on what they were experiencing, and those names stuck around. In conclusion, your seasonal vocabulary is the result of centuries of observation, a few poetic guesses, and probably one guy named Greg who just really liked the word spring. And there you have it, the surprisingly poetic journey from spring of the leaf to, oh no, it's winter again. It's wild to think that the seasons we plan vacations around, blame for our moods, and write cheesy Instagram captions about all started with some ancient folks just trying to name what the sky was doing. So next time you complain about the weather, just remember, you're participating in a 1,000-year tradition of seasonal drama. If you enjoyed this video, or if you're wondering what season is your favorite, leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Also, if you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for tuning in, and join us next time here in the channel that answers all the why, what, who, where, and how questions you've always wondered about, here on Explaining Everything.